Showtime, folks. Enjoy the show.
Howdy, folks. You like blood, violence, freaks in nature? Then come on down to Matt Presents, where we got movie nights showing the weirdest, freakiest, most disgusting movies you have ever seen. Last time we watched Rob Zombie's Firefly trilogy. I did figure out why it's called that. It's because their last name is Firefly. I didn't pick that up the first time I saw the movie. Of course, Firefly's not even their real last name. They never really reveal what the characters' real names are. So, House of a Thousand Corpses is the first Rob Zombie film I ever saw, and I'm kind of glad I did because the second and third Rob Zombie movies I saw were Halloween and Halloween 2, and if I'd just seen those, it would have pretty immediately turned me off to his work. Whereas House of a Thousand Corpses I really like. It's a really fun movie. Really sick, really... It gets dark. It gets disturbing. I get why and it's not everyone's thing. You know, I recognize that this will not be everyone's thing, but I really liked it. It's got a great sense of style. It's really fun, really dark, really... There's a lot of very tongue-in-cheek dark humor to it that I really like. That's the thing. I said Rob Zombie was probably the most divisive director I could think of. And I understand why. Like, there's a lot of people that love Rob Zombie's movies, and there's a lot of people that just hate Rob Zombie movies. And I completely understand both sides of that. He's got a very unique style, and it's a style that could really easily turn people. Like, even the Rob Zombie movies I like, I'm willing to go, if you don't like it, I understand why. I'm not gonna stand here and be like, oh, you guys are sleeping on House of a Thousand Corpses. Like, if you're not into that shit, you're not gonna be into it. House of a Thousand Corpses is the story of these teenagers going cross-country, stopping at these little, tourist trappy shops. And they stop at one and find out that, there's a local legend about this guy called Dr. Satan, and he was hung from a tree by his patients, and no one ever found his body. The next day his body was gone. And so they try to go find that tree, but along the way, their tire they get a flat tire, and they pick this girl up, and she goes, oh, here, I'll take you to my house. One of my brothers has a tow truck. And they're just this whole family of sickos, weirdos, just really freaky, really weird, and then about halfway through the film, it just turns into an all-out, I don't want to say torture fest, because there's not that much. It's not like a torture porn movie. There is a little of that, but it's not that. It's a lot of psychological torture more so than, violent shit. That does make the pacing a little awkward, that, all the horror stuff hits about halfway through, rather than, later in the movie. And I mean, even then, by the time they get to the Firefly's house, we've established that the Fireflies are not okay. These are bad people. And so there's not a whole lot of suspense about, oh god, is something bad gonna happen? It's yeah, something bad is gonna happen. We know something bad's gonna happen. House of a Thousand Corpses, shot in 2000... maybe even late 99, and it was produced by Universal. Universal gave Rob Zombie the funding to make it, and they did a test screening, and Universal was basically we can't release this. This is unreleasable. No one will come see this movie. And So they dumped the film, and like 2-3 years later, I think it was 2003, the film got picked up by Lionsgate, who put it out, and then immediately funded a sequel to it. What's ironic about that, and I would not be the first person to point out the irony in this, is that now, if you go to Universal Studios, they have a Halloween haunted house based around House of a Thousand Corpses. And it's like, you guys were the ones who didn't want House of a Thousand Corpses, and now it's like, oh yeah, we want House of a Thousand Corpses now that it's profitable. You know, we didn't think it would be profitable then, but we want the money now. I have no idea who this is on the cover. Like, I'm trying to figure out which character that is. Do you see? It might be, I think that might be Bill Moseley? Bill Hold on, how do I pronounce that? Bill Moseley. Bill Moseley. We'll go with that one. I think it might be Bill Moseley, but I can't quite tell. It doesn't really look like any of the characters. So I don't know. But yeah, House of a Thousand Corpses. I saw it a while back. I liked it, and it was enough to get me to watch the 2 other movies in this series, which, truthfully, I'm glad I did. I liked them both. I guess sort of spoilers up front, but I do have words for 3 from Hell, but we'll get to that. House of a Thousand Corpses is probably my favorite of the 3. That said, I recognize Devil's Rejects is gonna be the more mainstream friendly movie, the more easily digestible movie, you know. Like House of a Thousand Corpses is kind of out there, and Devil's Rejects feels more like a conventional horror film. It is pretty fucked up. I won't lie about that. They really escalate a lot of the stuff that was in the first film, but it's a lot tamer in terms of just the disturbing elements of the film. It tones down sort of the weird visual style the first film had. There's like all these little interludes that were like handheld shot on video stuff that just pop up throughout the film, and that's absent from the second one. Also, like, a lot of like the lore set up by the first film is just sort of abandoned to focus on like these 3 characters. Because you've got like the whole sick-ass family, the whole Firefly family in the first film, and then one of them dies, one of them gets arrested, and one of them disappears through most of the film. So you're left with 2 of them and a character who wasn't even really part of the Firefly family in the first film. Sid Haig's character, Captain Spalding, they imply he's associated with the Firefly family in the first film, but they never like explain what his relation is. And in the second movie, turns out he's their father. He's Baby and goddamn, what was the other guy's name? I know Sherry Moon Zombie's character is named Baby. I forget the other character, even though I watched 3 fucking movies with him. Otis. That's his name. Otis. Yeah, Captain Spaulding is Otis and Baby's father, and then the 3 of them just sort of go on this, cross-country rampage. And Dr. Satan doesn't show up at all. He's just dropped from the movie entirely. Apparently there was a scene with him in it that got cut. Like, they took him to a hospital and he ripped out someone's throat. But that didn't make the movie, unfortunately. I wish it did. I wish they'd brought back Dr. Satan, but whatever. Now you got the three main characters of Devil's Rejects. It's just mostly about them and not the crazy weird-ass family. Which, granted, it might help it a little because, like, House of a Thousand Corpses is pretty heavily inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, you can tell right off, like, this is a Texas Chainsaw esque movie. I mean, even on the back here, the quote they have for the movie is from Tobe Hooper. One hell of a great horror movie, says Tobe Hooper, director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I mean, it stars Bill Mollesy, who was Chop Top in Chainsaw Part 2, Texas Chainsaw Part 2. But, you know, you got the weird-ass hick family that murders everyone that comes out there, and then the second one, it's not a family anymore, it's three people, and they're not waiting for people to come to them, they're going out into the world and killing people. Devil's Rejects is a lot of fun, though. I do enjoy it, and I do think it is the more accessible of the two movies. I mean, probably there's a lot of people that have watched Devil's Rejects without even realizing it's a sequel to something. Because nothing about the title, Devil's Rejects, suggests that it's a sequel, so... And it's a lot more popular than House of a Thousand Corpses. I feel like more people have seen Devil's Rejects than have seen House of a Thousand Corpses. It is sort of a who's who of, like, minor horror actors. Like, any of the characters in any of the actors in any of these films are, like, guys movies I review would hire for, like, one day of filming and then slap their name on the box. So it's like, because, I mean, Karen Black and Erwin Keyes, it's happened too. I've reviewed movies where both of those actors show up for, like, one day of filming, and then they slap their name on the box because it's a famous horror person. They were in the famous horror movie. So it's sort of a who's who of, you know, the minor horror actors, except in this film, unlike all the films I would review where they would get that person in for one day, they're, like, major characters in all of these movies. So, you know, you got... it stars Sid Haig, who was in a lot of stuff back in, like, the 70s. He was real big in the 70s, and then this sort of brought his career back. I mentioned Bill Mollesy was in... Bill Mollesy. That's not an easy name to say. He was in Texas Chainsaw Part 2, and the unreleased Chop Top movie. Release the Chop Top movie. It's like All American Massacre or something. There's a movie about Chop Top, the character from Texas Chainsaw Part 2, that they filmed in, like, 2000, and just no one's released it yet. And it's like, why? It's a Texas Chainsaw tie-in. There's already a built-in audience for this. Karen Black's in it. I mentioned Karen Black. She was in Ooga Booga, and of course Erwin Keyes has been in a few movies I've reviewed. Ken Foree of Dawn of the Dead. That's the one he's most known for. He was also in... Oh, he was in Texas Chainsaw 3. That's what he was in. Texas Chainsaw 3. So, you know, get all the Texas Chainsaw actors into this. The gentleman from Hills Have Eyes, whose name is escaping me right now. Michael Berryman, the guy from Hills Have Eyes. You know, like the famous guy on the cover with, like, the weirdly large forehead. That's just what he looks like in real life. Like, they cast him to play this, like, horror movie monster, and it's like, that's just what the dude looks like. That's unfortunate for him. That now that's how he's seen. Everyone is like, oh, it's the guy from Hills Have Eyes. Because he's very distinct looking. Even, like, there's, like, very brief cameos. Like, apparently Mary Warnov is in this movie, and I didn't even notice. And someone else had like a 2-second cameo in one of these, and I forget who it was. But yeah, who's who of minor horror actors, most of whom are dead now, unfortunately. Recently dead, even. Like, all of them are dropping off at about the same time. Michael Berryman just died a few years ago. I think Karen Black is still alive. Let me double check that. Okay, no. Karen Black, 2013, dead. So yeah, Karen Black is dead. Michael Berryman is dead. Sid Haig is dead. We'll get to that. We'll definitely talk about that. Ken Foree, I think, is still kicking. Ken Foree, still alive. Good on him. He might not have long based on, how many of these other actors have died very recently. Devil's Rejects is basically the FBI finds out about the Firefly family, does a raid on their home, and Otis and Baby get out and meet up with Captain Spalding, and they, cross-country murder session, just killing everything in their way. They go out to visit Ken Foree, who is Captain Spaulding's brother. I feel like the implication was that it's his half-brother because Ken Foree is black and Sid Haig is not. I do think Sid Haig could pass for biracial, but the implication is also that Sherry Moon Zombie and Bill Molesley are his children, and they don't. I don't believe for a second they have any black in them. They are very white. It's weird that their uncle is black, and maybe he's adopted. They don't elaborate. It just, Ken Foree is their uncle. And I mean, he and Sid Haig do kind of look like, I buy that they're half-brothers, but I don't buy that he's their uncle. And then, escalating tensions. They're being tracked by this police officer who's the brother of the police officer they killed in the first movie. So it's like a revenge plot. It's a lot of fun. I enjoyed Devil's Rejects. I think this is a pretty good movie. I would say, of the Rob Zombie movies I've seen, easily the most accessible. It's a lot more like a normal horror movie than a lot of his other stuff. Which is not to say it's perfectly like other horror movies. There is still that Rob Zombie flair. You can tell it's Rob Zombie. I appreciate that they made Otis more Charles Manson-y in this one. Like, he even outright quotes Manson at one point. Because in the first film, it feels like he's still kind of playing Chop Top from Texas Chainsaw 2. Just like this weird guy who says weird things and looks weird. That's another thing. Like, you got Karen Black and Sherry Moon Zombie in this family. And it's like, okay, the two women, very attractive. All of the guys, ugly as fuck. Like, how do you do that? How's genetics work like that? You get two hot women, and then the dudes are like stringy hair down their face. Half of them are like 7 feet tall. It's like, what's going on here? Yeah, I liked Otis a little better in this movie. And Bill Molesley has like a really nice voice, but it feels like it's too nice for this character. Like, because Manson, when he talked crazy. Manson had he was emotional. He had quite an accent, first off, and he was very wild with his, delivery. And Bill Molesley, he has this very nice, very well-spoken voice, and it's like, that's not what Manson should sound like. And I get the character's not actually Manson, but, like, clearly he's supposed to be Manson. very Manson-inspired character. Oh, that's another weird thing. Like, the first movie, there's no implication that it takes place in the past at all. Like, I was pretty sure the first film was set modern day, like, early 2000s. Because it just looks like it's set in the early 2000s. And then in the second film, it's revealed that this takes place in, like, 1978. And it's like, what? Since when did it take place in 1978? Since when is this a period piece? But no, apparently they were both period pieces. But that means this takes place, like, not even 10 years after the Manson family murders. And in the first movie, they mention Charles Manson. So he exists in this universe, and then you've got this guy who decides, I want to look and act exactly like Charles Manson 8 years after he's been arrested. Of course, the part people always play wrong, Manson was not a killer. Manson was a cult leader who got other people to kill for him. Manson's a fucking pussy. He didn't do shit. I got this double feature at Walmart a little over a year ago. It was like $5 for both films, and I'm like, hey, I really like House of a Thousand Corpses. I want to watch the sequel, Devil's Rejects. And then the third movie came out, and I'm like, well, now I wish I had all three in a box set, because now they have a box set of all three. Maybe I should go ahead and get it. But you can kind of tell with this one that it was a double feature that they just added House of a Thousand Corpses to, because it's Devil's Rejects and like a 2-hour making of documentary of Devil's Rejects. And this one's labeled Disc 1, and this one's labeled Disc 2, but House of a Thousand Corpses is not labeled Disc 3. It's not labeled at all. This is not a disc number. So it's clear, like, these two discs came in a set together, and then they're like, just throw House of a Thousand Corpses in there too, and make it another box set. So, the last film we watched was 3 from Hell, the final film in the Firefly trilogy. As of now, unless Rob Zombie decides to make more, because 3 from Hell came out last year, which I think makes it the most recent movie we've looked at on Matt Presents. It's only about a year old. Like last September it came out. I had a lot of fun watching 3 from Hell, but it's one of those films that, like, when you think back on it, you're sort of like, I don't actually think that was that great. It feels really disjointed, both from the first 2 films and from itself. Like, if I showed you House of a Thousand Corpses, skip Devil's Rejects completely, and then just showed you, like, the last 20 minutes of 3 from Hell, you'd be like, what the fuck? This can't be the same series. Nah. 3 from Hell, basically, like, the first 20 minutes are wrapping up loose ends from Devil's Rejects, because, spoilers for Devil's Rejects, at the end they end up in a shootout with police, and it is implied that they die. So, this film starts by revealing, oh no, they were alive, and they went to jail, and this is what's happening with all of them. They bring Captain Spalding back to life, and then he gets executed. He gets the death penalty, and is not in the movie anymore, because Sid Haig was in very bad health. He died, I think, 4 days after this film came out. And it's clear, like, they introduced this other character. It's, like, Baby and Otis's cousin, or half-brother. No, it's their half-brother they introduce. And it's clear this script was written with Sid Haig as Captain Spaulding in mind as the third character, and then he just, like, couldn't do it. Because he is in the movie very briefly. They interview him at the beginning of the movie. Because, like, the first, like, 20 minutes... the first, like, 10 minutes are, like, a found footage movie. It's a documentary about the Firefly family. Reminds me a little of, like, Natural Born Killers. Honestly, like, the whole opening reminds me of Natural Born Killers. Like, first 20 minutes reminds me of Natural Born Killers. They sort of wrap up all the loose ends from Devil's Rejects. They're like, oh, the characters all lived. Captain Spalding was executed. Otis went to jail and broke out. And then there's like this plot he and his half-brother put together to spring Baby from jail as well. And then after that, they go to Mexico, and it feels like a completely different movie. Especially because this is the longest one in the trilogy. It's like nearly 2 hours. So it just feels like that opening bit was like the prologue. And then you start the actual movie, which is totally unconnected from that beginning part. And the rest of the movie feels like a Robert Rodriguez action crime movie. And I don't just say that because it's set in Mexico. Although that doesn't help. That definitely makes it feel more like a Rodriguez film. But it's also like these wild, crazy characters getting in all these wild, crazy shootouts and action scenes. There's like a sword fight near the end. And it's like, and Otis is in it, and you want Otis to win. And it's like, when did Charles Manson become the hero of this series? Since when are we rooting for Manson? Because, like, in the first film, there are main characters, and then the Firefly family is torturing them, the main characters. And then in Devil's Rejects, it does shift a little. They are the main characters, but they're still, like, the bad guys. You're still not supposed to be that sympathetic towards them. In this film, they're like anti-heroes. And it's like, what the fuck? And let me be clear, in the back half of this film, they're anti-heroes. In the first 20 minutes, they do a lot of fucked up shit, and then it's like, yeah, all that, forget all that. Now they're like anti-heroes who are out getting in gunfights with the cartel. That's how this franchise is ending. Just such an odd direction to go with the franchise. Again, not that I disliked it. I enjoyed it while I was watching it. I think part of my enjoyment of it might have been affected by watching all three films back to back. So that weird disconnect between like the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie isn't as noticeable when you've kind of also had that disconnect between all three movies. Still, it's like this feels so out. This is not a horror film. Three from Hell is not a horror film. It's an action crime movie. It's like you put on the ending of Natural Born Killers, and then when Natural Born Killers was over, you put on Desperado. That's Three from Hell. And I like Natural Born Killers, and I like Desperado. Neither of them work here. They don't go together, and it's not appropriate for the franchise this is supposed to be a part of. So in context, it's not great, but it was fun to watch. I did enjoy watching it. I did enjoy all the weird, wild, crazy things that happen in this movie. You know, so a bit of a hard sell on this one. Although I could almost see people who didn't like the first two movies watching this one and being like, yeah, this is way better because it's not as dark and grim as the first two movies. It's much more light, much more, action thriller than the other two. I feel like this whole trilogy already has a very selective audience, and then this movie is going to be for an even more specific audience. Like, people who enjoyed the first two films and aren't gonna be offended when the third movie isn't anything like the first two movies. Which, I was okay with it. If someone else was not okay with it, if like a fan of the first two movies came up to me and was like, Three from Hell, totally garbage, ruined the franchise, I'd be like, I understand. I get why you feel that way. It feels really out of place. So, last week I asked you what some divisive films you liked are. I suppose my top pick might be Michael Haneke's Funny Games, because apparently there's a lot of people that really don't like that movie, which is so weird to me because, in my opinion, it's like Haneke's most accessible film. That's like if I were going to recommend a Haneke film to someone, it'd probably be like that or Amor, depending on the type of person they are. Because like Haneke's films are like long, slow, very quiet movies, punctuated by these moments of extreme violence. So his audience is someone who A, is looking for a slow, quiet art house movie, and B, okay with extreme violence. And that's not a lot of people. That's a very small demographic. So I feel like Funny Games is one of his more accessible ones because it's more of a straightforward horror film. There's less of that, like, silent art house stuff going on. And on the flip end, there's Amor, which is just sort of a romance movie. It does have its dark moments, but as far as, like, the ends of the extremes for Haneke movies, it's Funny Games and Amor. Those are the two I would recommend people start with, because they're a lot more easily digestible than the other stuff he puts out. I don't know why. I don't know why Funny Games is as divisive as it is. Also, Escape from Tomorrow, I kind of liked, and that seems like a film that a lot of people hate, and there's also a lot of people that are like, hey, this is a cool, fun movie, I like this, so bit of a divisive choice. Henry Koslik says, first off, love House of a Thousand Corpses, saw it randomly in 8th grade, and loved it to death. I will defend Battlefield Earth and Waterworld, both considered some of the worst movies ever made, and painfully expensive, with a hidden message that the directors put in far more obvious in Waterworld than Battlefield Earth. Just love the action and the world building to this day. That floating city of traitors makes me happy to think about in Waterworld. They managed to pull it off just barely, and everyone's on the brink of starvation or dehydration, and it's just fully realized and awesome to me. I don't know if Battlefield Earth is really that divisive. You might just be in the minority on that one. I think most people sort of accept Battlefield Earth as, like, a pretty bad, like goofy bad movie. There is stuff about Battlefield Earth I think was well done. But, like, the acting, the cinematography, and the story are just really bad. So, the things that they did well don't really make up for that. Waterworld, I get it. I understand you on that one. Waterworld's a bit of a guilty pleasure for me. I enjoy watching it. I don't think it's a great movie. Like, again, Waterworld, it's a movie, they put so much effort into that movie. There's a lot of effort put into that movie, and there's a lot of good stuff. But it's like, what if Mad Max, but the whole world was the ocean instead of a desert? And I mean, that's kind of cool, but also it's not a very good movie. Also, just gotta put it out there, Kevin Costner, not a good actor. I do not like Kevin Costner. He's been in, like, a good movie. Maybe two. He's been in, like, 2 good movies. But Waterworld is fun. It's a fun watch. Might be worth it for Matt's movie nights. Although I remember that movie being, like, super long. It might be too long. Let me check. Let's see what the runtime of Waterworld is. 2 hours and 15 minutes. Yeah, that's a little... After Caligula, I decided I wasn't showing any more 2-hour-plus movies. I've had some, like, right at the mark, like 158 since then, but 2:15, that's too much. But it's a fun movie. I like it. Runo Q Ramalho, apparently not dissuaded by my complete butchering of his name last time, says, the act of seeing with one's own eyes. Most people I talk about it with tend to be understandably disgusted by the film. Have to agree that it's far from an easy watch, but it is a masterpiece. I don't know what movie he's referring to here. He doesn't say the name of a movie. Maybe House of a Thousand Corpses. I'm thinking he means House of a Thousand Corpses. I did look to see if the act of seeing with one's own eyes was a movie, but he doesn't, capitalize it like it's a movie, so I assume he's talking about House of a Thousand Corpses. My only other guess is that he's talking about the act of killing, which that statement applies to the act of killing. It is a hard sit, but it is a masterpiece. Way more than House of a Thousand Corpses. House of a Thousand Corpses is just a dumb, fun horror movie. Act of Killing, brilliant. Brilliant movie, but also a very hard sit. Lino comments that he was gonna say Cabin in the Woods until I brought up the loving part, because Lino does not like Cabin in the Woods. I disagree. I really love Cabin in the Woods. I think it's a very funny movie. A lot of good moments in that film. So he says, I'll say pretty much any Jess Franco movie. Sadomania, maybe? I don't think Jess Franco is super divisive, because there's people who know who Jess Franco is and people who don't watch Jess Franco movies. If you don't like Jess Franco, I don't know anyone who dislikes Jess Franco, because I don't know anyone who knows about Jess Franco. Weird director. He's got some interesting movies. There may be some Jess Franco in the future for this show, but I don't know if he's really divisive, because you have to be known to be divisive, right? Also, you're wrong about Cabin in the Woods. Cabin in the Woods is a good movie. So, it's the end of Metalween. It's October 30th. Tomorrow is Halloween, as this video comes out. Unless you're watching it on Patreon, in which case you're seeing this a day early. Although, most of my Patreon subscribers wait till it's out on YouTube anyways. So I'm gonna end the month. We've been talking about a lot of, metal zombie movies, so we're gonna do my 2 favorite metal zombie movies, and just a random third movie that Slayer happened to do the soundtrack for. My question this week: what is your favorite metal movie, heavy metal movie? What's your favorite heavy metal movie? Because, just seems obvious. Maybe I should qualify that with horror movie, your favorite heavy metal horror movie, because I feel like if I just say, your favorite heavy metal movie, the obvious answer is Spinal Tap. Don't say Spinal Tap. What's your favorite heavy metal movie that isn't Spinal Tap? Everyone knows Spinal Tap. It's a great movie. Anyways, tonight we're going to start with Deathgasm. Probably not a surprise. I have talked about this several times already on my channel. So, here it is. We're watching Deathgasm. Next, we're going to watch a film called Pledge Night. An early 90s horror movie, which Slayer did the soundtrack for. Look forward to that. And we're going to end with Wild Zero, the Japanese film starring rock and roll band Guitar Wolf. This is not an easy movie to come by. I checked, it's on YouTube. So if you're looking for Wild Zero, it's on YouTube. But it's not available for streaming anywhere. Even if you rent it. And the DVD's a little out of print, so I'll talk about it next time. those are my Metalween movie night picks. Deathgasm, Pledge Night, and Wild Zero. Until next time, I'm Matt. Happy Metalween.